You here back at the microphone once again after it seems like a rather long absence. A bit strange to be thrown back into the hectic round again of the studio here. But it's nice to be back with you here at the microphone. Nice to have your company this morning as well as indeed every morning. Nice to tune in actually as well while I was off the past week on retreat and taking a much needed rest, I must say, and disconnect from all things busy here and restoring and recovering a little bit of energy and a bit of headspace is the other thing too. All of these things, and of course spiritual space likewise. So very good to come back now once again and to see all things moving along nicely in their own gentle way here at Radio Maria. So thank you for your company, thank you for being part of it, and indeed thanks to Aidan and all the gang minding the place and preventing it from falling apart. In the meantime, the growth really of the radio has been quite extraordinary, really since those early years when Aidan and myself were here with Joy. Uh, Things have really moved on a huge pace altogether. And we're regrouping and re-establishing and reconnecting since Sarah's departure now. Ruth Terran Hogan has joined us as a promoter on the staff and is just finding her feet now this week. We'll be chatting with her on air in the course of time. You may have heard her speaking yesterday with Ashling. So that's nice to have the promotion department, the wheels kept in motion there now as well, and it'll take her a little while, of course, to settle into things. So looking forward to growth in that area, ongoing growth all the while. Our 40 Days for Life, of course, has been continuing ever since, and if that's something you would like to participate in, we would certainly welcome a visit by you to the studio here. But please, 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 always let us know ahead of time. Do please contact us first and let us know. I do hope if you're watching on Facebook, and shout out to everybody on Facebook and YouTube watching as well, that you are able to participate a little bit in the prayer through our Facebook page. We've been setting up the camera there, if you've noticed, for a little time during each day so that you can join in real time while it's on stream with our adoration here in the studio chapel as well. Simply just the image of the Blessed Sacrament there in our chapel and the prayers that are continuing on in the background through the microphone on the Facebook camera here, which may be a little bit different from what you hear on the radio because what's broadcast can sometimes come through the mixing desk and will vary a little. As you'll notice here watching this, you'll hear the voices in my ears every now and again coming through on Facebook instead of on the radio too. So do give a call. 014 123 456 is the telephone number. We do love to hear from you. Mary's away this week. Mary's on a little trip to Lourdes, I think it is, which is nice as well. So she's not there to answer the phone, but Ruth is certainly on hand now, as indeed Ashling as well, and others are in the building to help pick up the phone and chat to you. 014 123 456. If you'd like to volunteer for a little bit of time during the day or even during the night to adore the Lord in the Blessed Sacrament, do get in touch with us. We'll pass on the number, we'll pass your number on to Paula and John. They have a dedicated smart or mobile phone for organising all things to do with the adoration, and so that's there indeed at the service of the 40 days and 40 nights. And just a huge thank you to so many. We've been on the go now for 2 weeks, I think it was a Wednesday, it'll be 2 weeks tomorrow, of the 40 days, so it's 14 days. If you remember the last time, or the first time we attempted the 40 day and 40 night adoration, we made it to day 26, and unfortunately because of COVID and lockdowns and restrictions, it all came to a grinding halt. And then we tried again when the restrictions were eased about 6 months later, and again restrictions were imposed again, and it failed the second time. So now, please God, it's a third run, a third attempt, and with God's help we'll keep going, but with your help too. So do please get in touch. Do please sign up for a little time during the day or during the night. Excuse me. And if you're coming some distance, maybe you might consider volunteering for the full night. Maybe, I don't know, or for the bulk, let's say, of a night shift, so that you can travel late and leave early in the morning. Say, only throwing ideas out, really. Again, the number +353 1 014123456 or 014123456. Or again, if you would like to email us here, info@radiomaria.ie is the email address. And if you want to text and WhatsApp us now to, why not send in your details, send in your prayer requests, send in your questions, 089 467 2000 plus 35389 467 2000, or indeed drop a comment here on Facebook now or perhaps later, and we'll can reply through Facebook too. And again, finally, if you'd like to write to us, it's very easy to put pen to paper and write to us here at St. Anthony's Business Park, Ballymount Road, Dublin 22. St. Faustina today, what a lovely saint. She's not actually in our calendar, our liturgical calendar for Ireland. No doubt she will be put in time. She's there as, she is in the liturgical calendar, but she's not there in the sacramentary or in the missals of the church for Mass. So it's very much at the discretion of the priest as to what readings and that would be chosen as an optional memorial. But a Polish religious sister, of course, born in, I'm not going to pronounce this correct, but Lagowicz in Poland in 1905, and then died at the young age of 33 in 1938 in Krakow in Poland too, as a religious sister, very young age. And extraordinary that she should die just before the Second World War and perhaps spared some of the awful atrocities of the war, especially in Poland, as a result of the invasion of Hitler from the west and then the Russians and communists from the east afterwards. Poland's just been through the ringer. I mean, they like it's something we share in common, Ireland and Poland, it being a country, a victim country, if you like, of persecution, prolonged persecution. And yet, from the ranks of the wonderful Polish people, the likes of St. Maximilian Kolbe, the likes of St. Faustina, and of course Pope St. John Paul II, the Great, surely, that out of the crucible of immense suffering, God brings enormous mercy to the world. That's an equation of faith well worth keeping in mind, that somehow and mysteriously, and why, you might say, would the Lord permit such terrible suffering and evil, yet that he can bring a greater good from that. So the Divine Mercy devotion, as we know it, we have the Divine Mercy chaplet here every day at 3 o'clock, except for Fridays, of course, the Stations of the Cross, and Sundays when we have Mass from Knock. But we, from our oratory now as well, we're featuring the Divine Mercy Hour, and in that bringing all of your prayer intentions before the Lord, and through that indeed great grace flowing and great healing flowing. But that as just one example, but again the great instrument now that Divine Mercy is to the world in our times and for our times, which we see manifesting perhaps even greater peril in so many ways, even above and beyond the terrible atrocities of the last century, because we see the attack on the human person, the dignity of the human person, attacks on marriage and the family, the secular, humanistic, atheistic denial of God, and the casting aside of things of faith, and then the corresponding and sort of correlative evil that comes upon us when, if we walk away from God, we lose the source of grace, of light, and of truth. And the consequences are there to be seen plainly for all those who do so. It leads to a life of individualism, of selfishness, of self-seeking and self-centered, of greed and of profiteering, and all these things which have no consideration for the other person as other, made in the image and likeness of God. So when we cast God off to the side, when we push our faith away from us, when we abandon prayer and we turn away from Jesus, the waves and the storms of the world crash in upon us, and like St. Peter, we sink. We sink beneath those waves. And can we not see that happening in and around us and among so many of our loved ones. And it can be quite the trial for us. Yet we look to the great saints. Again, Saint Faustina, she persevered, even though misunderstood, even though, as it were, challenged by the Lord, that her life, she was made to see. If you read the diary, it's an extraordinary book. You read of her great interior battle and struggle and war with the self and with sin, and yet the Lord in his great mercy standing by her all the time. So she was a Polish Catholic nun, of course, and a mystic, Jesus speaking to her. That's not something we should strive for, to hear interior locutions or to get messages. Never a good idea to pursue that. It's something always to be rejected, curiously enough, because we're so easily deceived. But if it is that the Lord, wants to reveal himself in that way, it will be the way of the cross, most certainly. You've Padre Pio as a perfect example there as well. Saint Faustina, when you read her story, the suffering that she had to endure, most extraordinary journey. But she was the first saint, of course, of the new millennium, canonized in the year 2000 by Pope St. John Paul II, and of course he was to die on the eve of the Feast of Divine Mercy in 5 years later. So it's marvellous again how a Polish Pope would raise to the altars one of their own, and why not, and to be himself the Pope of the Divine Mercy in his own turn as well. So she has earned the title, I suppose, the Secretary of the Divine Mercy in its own way. And again, the diary that she has composed is an extraordinary document, and we quote from it here liberally, of course, on Radio Maria for you, and it really does speak to the heart. I came across, and I must dig it out, because since I've come to the radio, a lot of my stuff is buried in boxes, and books and all these kind of things are sort of locked away. But I bought, when I was visiting Krakow for the World Meeting of Families, for the World Youth Day, I bought a set of CDs of the reading of the diary with a Polish female voice. I don't know if she was religious or not, but a very clear English, but obviously with a heavy Polish accent, but just very nicely recorded and nicely put together, as if it was she herself, Saint Faustina, that is speaking. So I must dig that up, and if we could play even elements of it for you. Maybe somebody has it and can point us in the right direction. It might be available online. In fact, I just can't remember who produced it. I got it in the shrine, the Divine Mercy Shrine in Krakow at the time. So she was 20 when she joined the convent in Warsaw, and she later was transferred to a place called Plock and to Vilnius, and there she met Father Michał Sopoćko, who was to be her confessor and spiritual director, and who supported her devotion to the Divine Mercy. And with Father Sopoćko's help, she commissioned the artist to paint the Divine Mercy image. And as you know, he failed completely. The artist simply wasn't able to produce what Saint Faustina saw, nor, I'd say, more accurately, what she experienced in the vision of Divine Mercy itself. And yet, frail and limited as the image is, it's a very powerful source indeed, and of grace, and the Lord promising her, where it's displayed in churches, that his grace would flow. So it's blessed always then on the what's now Divine Mercy Sunday, or Low Sunday, the Sunday after Easter, second Sunday of Easter, and very much part and parcel of Divine Mercy devotion. So we have one here in the guest studio next to me here. We have one in the sacristy downstairs, and we have another Divine Mercy image in the oratory as well. So no shortage of Divine Mercy here. So an extraordinary religious sister, an extraordinary saint of our times, and I leave it to you to fill in the rest of that story there. But I would strongly commend, if you don't have a copy, obtaining a copy of the Diary of Saint Faustina and taking a little piece each day. Or if you're online, you can easily subscribe to some service or other that will post you a little piece of Divine Mercy. There must be oodles of such sources now of information um, online as well. Thanks, Maura. She says welcome back, and she welcomes Ruth to her new job as well, wishing her all the best in the new job. Radio Maria will be blessed by your ministry to us, Ruth. Thanks for that, Maura. Nice little welcome back there as well, so well done. And please God, we'll head off to the west before too long as well. We certainly would like to do so. Thanks again, Maura. I see you were in touch previously too. I was chatting with Roisin a couple of Saturdays ago about the question of pre-signed mass cards and discouraging the use of those entirely because they're business driven and profit oriented entirely. They have nothing to do whatever, I would argue, with any sense of what the church understands by masses being offered and the support that is due to priests, as this is a means of income for the priests. Here you have shops who capitalize on this, and it's wide open to abuse, and is abused in fact. And the card that I received there, again obviously from a well-meaning listener, had bought one of these, and written all over it was the obvious sense that this was a marketing scam is the right word, because you cannot put a price, of course, on the Holy Mass. And thanks, Maura. She says, I always support my local priests, both diocesan and the Augustinians, and aid to the church in need. I never buy from shops, and I encourage everyone I know not to buy from them. Please do. And I would encourage everyone likewise to do. And again, if I might qualify and make it very clear, this is not sour grapes. I do not do a business, no priest does business in mass cards. It's simply not something we do. It's a service we provide. It helps towards our upkeep, the upkeep of the priest, but it is anything but a commercial transaction. It's always an offering, and it's always done in faith. It's never over the counter, never intended to be. You might see it in some religious communities where they have that pre-arranged or preset, but again, it's never intended to be a commercial activity. It just isn't and cannot, and it's against the law. The church is simply not permissible at all, high up or low down. So this is not sour grapes saying, well, you're robbing business from me. That's not the case. There are plenty of priests to go around and plenty of mass offerings. It's a case of the element of the spiritual, that buying and selling in the spiritual life, in the spiritual journey, is wrong, because you cannot charge or put a price on the order of grace. The Lord didn't come charging for his services. He didn't have a sign up, open for business, come and be healed, €100 or 100 denarii a pop. that was far from his, like, God and money do not go together. The transaction that's working as always with the holy sacrifice of the Mass is simply for the upkeep of the priest and for the good of the church in a spirit of faith. Nothing else. It's not a commercial gain in any shape, size or form. So thanks for that, Maura, just reminding and just reflecting back on that little conversation that we had there some time ago as well. And Dermot was in touch as well, and these are a couple of backdated messages that have come in, and gratefully received as well. It's just catching up on them with you all there as well. Yes, one or two other messages I'll get to as well. So, for dear Father Eamonn, an excellent talk for the recent Feast of the Archangels, that would have been, was it Wednesday of last week? It was given on Radio Maria by a priest whose name I cannot recall. He explained the angelic hierarchy and made reference to the fact that angels are present at Holy Mass. Yes, amen to that. The angels are ascending and descending before the Lord's throne in droves at Holy Mass, simply because heaven is opened up and they are giving due adoration and celebration before the Lord, as that's what angels do. So yes, amen, they are, which is why I like myself, Dermot, perhaps you do too, to see angels depicted artistically in the church, in its surroundings, either in plaster images, in paintings, in stained glass windows, and as mysterious figures, in attendance on the elements of the artistry. So the saints, the Lord, of course, Himself, or the elements of the um, of the liturgy, or even what comes to mind is elements of the Passion. You see angels depicted beautifully painted or stained glass, holding, say, the nails with which Christ was crucified, or reverently holding the crown of thorns, and there, as it were, in attendance to every detail of the Lord's great suffering. It's lovely to see that artistically depicted there. Senior members of my family tell me it was quite common to hear such sermons on the angels before the Second Vatican Council. One doesn't hear much in sermons today about the presence of angels at Holy Mass. True enough, I would say artistically perhaps, well, yes and no. Maybe it just depends where you go. Certainly it's something I would bring to the microphone and bring to the topic of conversation at regular intervals. If you were journeying with me in the Chatechesis last year, we went through the entire book of questions and answers of Peter Kreeft on angels and demons, and fabulously informative book, cover to cover, that explored all of the things we know and that sacred scripture teaches us in relation to the angelic world. So I guess, Dermot, it depends really on who you listen to, or who, again, maybe the inclination of the priesthood. Now, none of this has gone away. None of this is sort of, it's not to suggest that it's all pre-Vatican II is spurious in a sense, or to see that as a sort of dividing line. It might mean that there's a certain re-emphasis in formation, or maybe poorer formation. Could argue that perhaps, but there's such a wealth, I suppose, of material as well, and catechetical material there. They should certainly be referred to often. I would agree with you there, certainly, Dermot, as well. And maybe there was a time in the past when people were more mindful of their angels. What we're seeing in general, I would say, Dermot, is a weakening of faith, really, which is where I started, I suppose. A kind of turning away from prayer and an exclusion of God. And with that, then all those other important things will likewise find themselves excluded and cast aside. So you could add to that the fact the angels aren't referred to. Is confession preached about as much as it ought to be? The real presence of Christ in the Holy Eucharist, again, does that get the time and the place it ought to get in our preaching and our ministry? And again, you could add to that list Our Lady in there, and so on. So yes, and I feel for you completely, and I'm with you all the way in relation to the abuses that go on in the liturgy, particularly in the Novus Ordo. He recalls the last time he attended the Novus Ordo, the celebrant dressed as a clown for the homily and used his own Eucharistic prayer. Well, that's reprehensible. I mean, that's just simply a nonsense. That should never happen anywhere, anytime. My own experience is that priests will invariably bring different nuanced ways of celebrating the sacred mysteries before us, and the faith of the priest will often determine, or the spiritual life will determine the reverence, or the how he celebrates the mysteries, whether or not worthily or whether or not appropriately. And so you will get, again, all kinds of hues and shapes and sizes. And I remember once Father Benedict Rochelle, great priest, the founder, of course, of the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal, having to take some of these new, young, enthusiastic recruits aside and say, look, I lived during the time of the old rite and the traditional form of the Mass, and things weren't so different back then. You had, schleppy priests in those days who were sloppy with their liturgical practice. It mightn't have been noticed as much given the form of the sacred liturgy, but human beings are still human beings. Men are still men, and he always tried to kind of quell that idea that everything was somehow romantically perfect in the past. No, it certainly wasn't. There were abuses wholesale of all kinds and all kinds of ways back in the old days too. What you do say, Dermot, and I agree wholeheartedly, Dermot, is what's also needed and very, very important, and which we seek to do here on the radio, nice and gently, is to help to bring uniformity in the Novus Ordo, the new rite of the celebration of the Holy Mass, and to seek to address all of the various abuses that have crept in. And sadly, some of that would be attributed to the idea that the priest has somehow to perform and be a presenter or be like you're dressed as a clown. I mean, where is he going with that idea? That's absurd in the extreme. Yes, there is enormous scope for attending to the reverent and beautiful celebration of the Mass as it's intended to be celebrated, both in the Novus Ordo, the new rite, and of course in the traditional form too. And I can wholeheartedly sympathise, and I perfectly realise why people would want to go back to the traditional form, because they've just been, as Dermot says there, the angels would have wept bitterly at that carry on. Absolutely lamentable. I've lamented my way through a number of Novus Ordo masses, and it can be hard work for sure. So Dermot, thank you for that. It's a very, very important conversation to have and to continue on, and indeed to be aware of. So good, I'm going to pause for a little brief interlude if I may. Jesus is on the mixing desk for us now, and Jesus has come from Galicia in Spain. Am I correct, Jesus? Yes. And is spending a little time with us learning English and learning our culture, perhaps more importantly, and getting used to how a radio station works. So all new experiences all around for Jesus. So nice to have Eamonn with us as well. So he's going to look after me here. And we're going to play for you the World Youth Day 2016 theme song. They're from Poland. Blessed are the merciful. So the English edition of this. And we'll take a couple of minutes of this and we'll be back with you again shortly. So thanks, Jesus. Thank you. Oh, they are blessed, are the merciful. There from World Youth Day from Poland in 2016. That's one I would be so familiar with. It doesn't has well, I could imagine that alright being sung by a million young people gathered before the Pope. Alright, that would have a good ring to us, I'm sure. A bit of an upbeat sense to it as well. So very good. Welcome back to Radio Maria Ireland. Thanks for your company here. Do drop a comment on our Facebook page. Do please text or WhatsApp on 0894672000. Give a call on the landline 014123456 as well. Mary was in touch, and this is a lovely question now to ask as well, an important topic to touch in on. She rang there last week. She said she always has a nervousness and a fear about death and about dying, and what happens to our soul when our body dies. She also has a fear of dying alone as she lives by herself. And Mary McDermott said, I told her I would see if you could answer this on your Chatechesis next week. So thank you for that, Mary. I think it's a very important question to address in relation to dying, and one to be explored at greater length than will be allowed to me here now in the few minutes that we have remaining. But it's natural, I suppose, humanly speaking, that we should have a fear of death. We have a natural inbuilt human sense of survival against all the odds. You hear incredible stories of people pulling through all kinds of traumas and drama in order to stay alive. And the body has that sort of built-in mechanism to avoid danger. Excuse me, avoid danger and to avoid death as well. It's the most extraordinary, and it goes beyond. It's not something premeditated. It's a very interesting thing. A natural sense of survival. So it's only natural that there would be a certain fear of dying too. But as for death itself, if we listen to the encouragement of the saints, if we pay attention to those who have had near-death experiences, there's and if again, if we're close to the Lord in faith and in prayer, there's every reason why we can be at peace in a certain way, or at least less anxious. And perhaps the one thing that we might be better off being anxious about is being in a state of grace and being worthy indeed of the eternal life that the Lord promises to those who have faith in Him. And so that's, of course, by the help of His grace. And Saint Joseph, as we know, is a wonderful patron and intercessor for those approaching death, because he was the one, of course, who would have passed away in the presence of Our Lady and the Lord Himself. And so we pray to Saint Joseph for a happy death. And I'd say there's no need to be over anxious or too allow anxiety to take too much of a hold of us, that we pray simply for the grace to I suppose the grace of a happy death, yes, but the grace to be at peace at that time, and to see death rather as a beginning, not an end, but as a beginning, a doorway opening. And it's those who would describe a near-death experience would describe their soul leaving their bodies, and that there was a continuity between being alive and suddenly being dead, as it were, clinically, but able to see everything around them, and then to somehow move as if effortlessly towards a light and towards a sense of peace and a sense of familiarity, and being able to communicate with others in that world of the spirit, but without using words, as if in the mind or telepathically. Those who come back from near-death experience, they speak in extraordinary terms, and they always kind of give up exasperated, because the words they try to describe it are never enough. And it seems to be always the case that those who have had a near-death experience they lose entirely all fear of death thereafter. They look forward to going back there to that beautiful place. There are those too, of course, who have had these near-death experiences and have come back and speak of a judgment and a condemnation, and they've been somehow through grace and through prayer been given an opportunity to come back and make amends. There was one lady, Gloria Polo, is that the right name, from Colombia. A lady who was a dentist, had been living a sinful life and admitted to it. After her near-death experience, she was, her nephew was with her. They were lining up for some event or other, and he was struck by lightning and killed, and she was affected by the lightning, and it did terrible damage to her. But when she came back, she described how she had been condemned, but for the prayers of an unknown man who had heard about her story in the newspaper and was praying for her salvation. And she was given the grace to return, and ever since she's been telling her story, extraordinary story of the mercy of God. And so if that's possible for the prayers of an unknown poor man somewhere, for her, that gives us great hope for the mercy that's available for each one of us too. And so if we can dwell upon the mercy, keep the image of the Lord before us so that we're never alone, even if we might live in the house alone. No doubt you have some holy pictures around Mary to look to remind you that you are very much not alone. Likewise, you have the company of Radio Maria now, which we know has brought amazing blessings to many who've made that journey into the next life. We've had that time and again. Family members calling us up, writing to us and letting us know that their loved one who loved listening into Radio Maria, loved the prayer, had passed away, had slipped away, but found great comfort and consolation in the companionship that the voice of the radio and the prayer here gave them. I just, that leaves me speechless in a way. I just love that element of our ministry here, that's what we're doing, accompanying you on your faith journey here and now, but also to the end. So I've run out of time, Mary. We should come back to that topic again, but I hope that helps a little bit. At least you'll have with Radio Maria the companionship and prayerful support of us with you when that time comes. And do not be afraid, don't be anxious. Simply, as St. Faustina teaches us today, to trust in the Lord, to trust in Him. Now my time has come to an end, a very short Chatechesis it seems today. We'll catch up again tomorrow. We'll keep the conversation flowing. I do always like to hear from you, so do please interact with us and connect in if you're listening back as well. And we'll continue on, please God, this time tomorrow. So just nearly 12 o'clock, it's time now for our Angelus and Midday Prayer.